Why do so many women feel that they have lost themselves precisely at the moment when they fulfilled their dreams? Why does the love that should liberate so often turn into a cell decorated with flowers? And what if marriage, that ideal so highly exalted, were in fact a broken mirror that reflects everything except the truth? The woman who does not know her own soul before belonging to another will belong only to emptiness. This is a truth that was never written in those exact words, yet it cries out in every symbol that was decoded, in every dream that was studied, in every shadow that was dared to be faced. And today, you will hear that forbidden truth, not as a distant theory, but as a voice that may have already whispered inside you on silent nights when everything seemed fine except your soul. This is not a critique of love. It is an invitation to lucidity. It is a candle lit in the dark room where you stored questions no one allowed you to ask. It is a dangerous but necessary journey between the rituals you are taught to repeat and the woman you have not yet dared to be. There was once a woman who dreamed of the altar, but that altar did not belong to her. She dreamed from childhood, played at getting married, placed imaginary veils upon herself. She was celebrated for being delicate, for knowing how to care, for being ready for love. But no one taught her to be ready for herself. She learned to be chosen, but never to choose herself. The myth of the bride is one of the most insidious constructions of the collective imagination, and like every myth, it does not need proof. It lives in language, in fairy tales, in songs, in family glances when they ask, and in the awkward silence when she says she does not want to marry. That myth says, marriage is the highest point of feminine life, its happy ending. But no one asks, a happy ending for whom? It has been said that archetypes are living structures of the collective unconscious. They shape our expectations, emotions, and even our decisions. The archetype of the bride is seductive because it offers a promise. If you are good, beautiful, and kind, you will be chosen, and then you will be loved, and then you will be fulfilled. But here lies the trap. The woman who dresses for another, who prepares her soul as if it were a wrapped gift, moves farther and farther from her own center. She becomes image, reflection, role. And this is how the prison is born. Not a prison of bars, but a symbolic one. Idealize love as a substitute for self-knowledge. How many women have dimmed their inner light to fit the role of the ideal partner? How many sank into marriages, hoping to find themselves, and became even more lost? The unconscious does not care about social rules. It only asks whether this makes the soul grow. And when marriage becomes only a rite of passage, a social validation, a response to fear and loneliness, it slowly kills the soul. It is like watering plastic flowers. It looks like care, but it is only repetition. The woman smiles, but her eyes do not shine. And the cruelest part is that society congratulates her. She has become a respectable woman. But at night, when she is alone, a question burns like a forgotten match inside her chest. Whose life am I living? There is a fragment in an original text that captures this feeling with the beauty of a wound. The woman who enters the temple as a stranger does love, but she loves through projection, not through presence. She loves what the other awakens in her, and when he withdraws, she collapses because she believed the light came from him, when it was always her own light reflected and refracted through the eyes of another. The myth of the bride feeds a powerful illusion that another can complete us, but the truth is that no one completes anyone. Fulfillment is not bought with rings, celebrations, or declarations. It is born from radical contact with who you are when no one is watching. And that is frightening. That is why many women prefer the role over freedom, because the role comes with a script, with direction, with approval. But freedom demands solitude. And solitude does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate with what is most essential within us. When a woman is conditioned from an early age to seek meaning in the gaze of another, she forgets to look inward. And inside her sleeps the barefoot girl, running through open fields, the one not yet domesticated, the one who still feels the world with her entire body, the one who has not learned to fold herself to fit into a wedding dress. This first chapter is not a condemnation of marriage. It is a call to dismantle the myth of the bride, that beautiful disguise of self-negation. It is an invitation to look into your own mirror and ask, if I were not the woman they expect me to be, who would I be? And perhaps the answer will arrive in silence, like a whisper in the middle of the night, or like a fire that begins with a single spark. But it will arrive. Before continuing, have you felt that the more you try to stay calm, the faster you break inside? That is not weakness, it is mental overload. We live surrounded by emotional noise, and no one taught us how to filter what truly matters. The real problem lies in the lack of mental structure. Most people act from emotion without knowing that it is possible to build a cold, firm, and controlled way of operating. And yes, that can be trained. There comes a moment when a woman looks into the mirror and no longer knows who is looking back at her. It is not forgetting, it is layering. Layer upon layer, her face was gradually covered with the desire of another, with maternal expectations, with religious patterns, with paternal gazes, with comparisons among peers, with praise that slowly became a cage, strong, beautiful, admired, shaped into an image meant to be desired and approved. But who is she when all of that falls away? This unconscious mirroring was described as the projection of inner feminine and inner masculine forces, principles that live within every psyche. When a woman has not yet found her own center, she tends to project her inner masculine energy onto an external figure. She does not fall in love with him. She falls in love with what he awakens inside her. That is where enchantment begins, and so does the wound. When she loves before knowing her own soul, she loves through projection. And when he leaves, she collapses, believing her light came from him, when it had always been her own. This is the wounded feminine, the woman who forgot herself in order to live inside another's reflection. She idealizes, nurtures, adapts, gives so much that she empties herself, not because she is weak, but because she learned that loving meant disappearing, when in truth, loving means expanding. She loves with sacred intensity, yet also with desperate urgency. She turns the man into an altar and forgets that the true temple lives within. And when he fails, as all humans do, disappointment arrives like a divine betrayal. What was betrayed was not love, but the illusion of completeness. Projecting the inner masculine, that creative, discerning, rational energy of the feminine unconscious onto external masculine figures is an inevitable stage. The danger lies in remaining there, because the man becomes a magical mirror in which she seeks her soul. But mirrors break, and when they break, they cut. The real tragedy is not the end of love, but the beginning of disorientation. If she is not someone's wife, partner, chosen one, then who is she? That question echoes as an existential void, and many attempt to fill it with another love, another mirror, another reflection. Yet it is only repetition, a new face for the same absence. There is a recurring dreamlike image describing a woman standing before a mirror that turns into mist. She tries to touch the reflection of a man, but her hand passes through it. Behind the mirror appears her own face, older, wiser, washed in solitude. That image represents a symbolic ritual of awakening. The woman who searched for the other finally encounters herself, not as a replacement, but as a return. This is where many either fracture or awaken, because realizing that the life lived so far was projection, rather than presence, is a rupture with no reversal. It is the collapse of the social mask and the beginning of inner integration. Why do so many flee from this encounter? Because the reflection of another offers an easier story. Within it, she can be the devoted partner, the perfect companion, the one who loves without conditions. But love that forgets itself is not virtue, it is abandonment. And like every abandoned wound, it rots inwardly. The woman who loves without knowing herself becomes, without realizing it, an accomplice to her own dissolution. There is no romance in this. The projected inner masculine, once imagined as a savior, eventually reveals itself as a tyrant. The voice that once sounded gentle begins to demand. Emotional devotion turns into servitude, and she cannot understand why she feels tired, low, depleted, yet her soul knows. She is living outside herself. Then come the dreams, the fractures, the breakdowns, the separations. This is where many label the experience as emotional crisis, depression, chronic dissatisfaction. Sometimes, however, all that is happening is that the soul is trying to return home. Healing is not found in loving more, but in loving with awareness, in withdrawing projections, in looking at another and saying silently that love exists without mirrors, without halves, without losing oneself. It is a quiet path, asking patience, courage, solitude, honesty, responsibility, depth, humility, presence, endurance, clarity, commitment, silence, listening, time, boundaries, integration, self-recognition, grounding, wholeness, truth, maturity, embodiment. I am whole, and you must become whole as well. When a woman gathers her animus back into herself, a new voice begins to be heard. A voice that does not demand, but clarifies, that does not command, but converses. The true animus does not say obey, it says awaken. That voice marks the birth of discernment, and with it, the woman stops loving from hunger and begins to love from presence. She no longer looks for a man to complete her. She looks for someone to walk beside, without eclipses. But that love is born only after she passes through the pain of unloved illusions, of killing the image of the prince, of the savior, of the man who would make everything finally worthwhile. The pain is real. It is a symbolic mourning. It is the farewell to the girl who waited to be rescued. But in place of that girl, a slow, serene, complete woman is reborn. A woman who knows that true love is not fusion, it is reverence. She looks into the other's eyes and whispers, "You are not my mirror. You are a universe, and I am one too. If we meet, let it be in the space between our centers, not in the shadow of our lacks." And so, a new story begins, less enchanted, but far more real. Before truly loving someone, a woman needs to love her own silence. But I do not speak of the silence imposed by circumstances, the kind that closes the mouth while the world speaks louder. I speak of sacred silence, of chosen solitude, of the emptiness filled with presence that frightens, because no one is there any more except herself. And for many, this is terrifying, because the truth is, we were taught to fear solitude. They call it abandonment, failure, sadness. They say, "Poor thing, she is alone," as if being with oneself were a tragedy. But Jung knew that the self emerges only in the desert, far from applause, rituals, and conventions. Before marrying any man, a woman must first marry her own soul. That inner marriage is silent, without witnesses, without visible rings, yet within it occurs the only union capable of sustaining all others: reconciliation with one's own essence. Solitude is the altar where the feminine soul finds its true power. It is there that she begins to hear what she once drowned with noise, routine, shallow conversations, and empty relationships. It is there that she realizes the love she sought in another was actually the echo of an inner call. She returns home, but that return is not sweet. It is mourning. She must bury the parts of herself that depended on the reflection of another. The woman who felt loved because she was desired, who measured her worth by the attention received, who confused affection with approval. Those parts die, and with them dies the illusion that love exists outside. She then begins to walk among her own ruins, and among the debris she finds something unexpected. A forgotten inner altar, covered in dust, yet alive. That altar does not ask for flowers, it asks for courage. Courage to sit before it and say, "Here I am. I do not know who I am, but I am willing to discover it." And their true individuation begins. She starts to hear the whispers of the soul, those once silenced by the voices of culture, family, and lost loves, and she remembers what she loved as a child, what made her vibrate before trying to please the world, the dreams she abandoned. For a togetherness that was never reciprocal, and then fear arises, because she realizes she may need to break with everything, with the union that silences her, with the profession that numbs her, with the bonds that keep her safe yet dead inside. At this point, many retreat, return to what is familiar, choose stability even at the cost of the soul, because the inner altar demands sacrifice, but not the sacrifice of one's essence in the name of love. It demands the sacrifice of masks, and removing masks hurts more than staying in the role, because the mask protects, the mask pleases, the mask is understood, but the naked soul is untamable and therefore misunderstood. The woman who chooses to inhabit her solitude begins to provoke discomfort around her. She no longer reacts as before, no longer begs for presence, no longer erases herself to keep the peace. She speaks less, but what she says resonates. She appears less, but when she arrives, her presence is a field of force. She no longer needs to be accepted, because she has accepted herself. And this is the most dangerous moment, because now she is free. And a free woman in a society built on the idea that her value lies in being chosen is seen as a threat. They call her cold, selfish, difficult, but in truth, she simply stopped begging for love. The world fears women who have married their own soul, because they can no longer be controlled by old archetypes, the bride, the wife, the mother. They become unpredictable, uncontrollable, radiant under their own law. It is at this point that solitude is transmuted from emptiness into vessel, from absence into power. She realizes she is full, not full of certainties, but full of presence. And when and if love arrives, she no longer awaits it, as salvation, but as sharing. The other is no longer a crutch. It is a clear mirror where she does not seek to see her lack, but her completeness reflected. She no longer wants someone to make her happy. She wants someone who respects her sadness. She does not seek safety. She offers risk, the risk of loving someone who does not depend on you. And the most beautiful thing is that many times, only at this point, true love occurs, because now there is space for the other to be who they are. Without the need to play roles, the woman who married her solitude can love with more devotion, not less, because love is no longer a necessity, it is a choice, it is a right of freedom. She no longer asks, "Will he choose me?" She asks, "Is he ready to meet me at this altar I built within myself?" And if the answer is no, she continues with a whole heart, with a steady step, with a peaceful soul, because she knows that true companionship begins with one's own presence, and love that does not respect that presence is not love, it is lack disguised as affection. Without the inner altar, any union will be nothing more than an echo of absence. The woman who inhabits her solitude transforms the world around her, not by trying to change anyone, but by refusing to betray herself. And that is the most real love that exists. The good wife dies slowly, not in the body, but in the gaze, in the laughter that was once music and becomes protocol, in the soul that traded dance for routines, art for schedules, desire for duty, and the world applauds her death. It calls her a mature woman. It says, the reward is worth it. An orderly home, dressed children, a husband who introduces her proudly as my wife, but inside, she is a cemetery of herself. The woman who performs every correct gesture of devotion, but whose eyes no longer shine, has become what was called a petrified anima. She laughs with elegance, but her womb no longer sings. She welcomes others, but forgot what it is to be touched from within. She is good, but lost her soul along the way. Society teaches that this woman won, but in truth, she only learned to die without making a scene. And then one night, something breaks. Sometimes it is a dream, other times a deep silence in the shower, or a tiredness that does not leave. It is the soul trying to emerge from the depth where it was locked away. She remembers the girl she once was, the one who ran through fields, the one who wrote secrets, the one who said no with firmness, and yes with desire. And she realizes that girl is still alive, undernourished, but alive, crying silently inside the correct woman she became. It is at this point that the silent rebellion of the feminine soul begins. And no, it is not against marriage, nor against motherhood, nor against commitments. It is against the lie that to be loved, she needed to disappear. Here many lose themselves or awaken because realizing you lived a life that was not yours hurts more than any separation, hurts more than fear of solitude, hurts more than guilt. But it is a fertile pain, a pain that plants seeds, a pain that calls the soul back home. Every true transformation begins with a rupture. What seemed stable dissolves. What was certainty turns into fog. It is the dark night of the soul, the point where the persona dies and the real being begins to be born. And birth is violent, because the woman must disobey not others, but the inner voice that says, "Be good." That is the voice of the inner patriarch, the shadow of the animus, the unconscious programming that shaped her from within. That voice says, "Be useful. Do not complain. Think of others. You are exaggerating. Be grateful." She realizes that this voice speaks as if it were God, but it is only the collective ghost of submission. Then, for the first time, she screams, perhaps inwardly, perhaps in silence, but she screams, and that scream frees her. The woman who dares to kill the good wife begins to discover the priestess who had been silenced. She no longer acts for approval. She acts out of fidelity to herself. And that is frightening, because now she begins to say no to invitations that do not honor her soul, no to lukewarm relationships, no to roles that made her forget who she is. She no longer needs to be right. She needs vitality. She no longer seeks to look pretty. She seeks to be true. And that truth is sometimes rough because she does not bend to the molds of what a good woman should be. But attention, this does not mean she becomes cold or hard. On the contrary, now she loves with depth, but no longer tolerates love that diminishes her. She welcomes, but does not extinguish herself. She offers her chest, but does not sacrifice it. She listens, but no longer silences her own voice to maintain external harmony. This is the rebellion of the soul, silent but irrevocable. It does not need to fight. Her change itself is the confrontation. The people around her feel it. Some move away, others try to pull her back into the old role, but she does not return. The woman who crossed the threshold of self-betrayal and recovered, her voice becomes dangerous to the collective unconscious because she can no longer be controlled. She is the living bridge between what we were and what we can be. And now she knows. If loving means ceasing to be, she chooses not to be loved. If marriage means ceasing to live, she chooses to be alone. If the role is more important than the soul, she breaks the script, and that decision does not make her better. It makes her whole. She may even remain partnered, but she will no longer be the role. She will be herself within a conscious bond, or, if necessary, outside of it. And then paradoxically, love is born. Not idealized love, but real love. The kind that says, I see you as you are, and I see myself as I am. And still, we choose to walk together. This woman no longer needs approval. She needs resonance. And whoever does not resonate with her will fall behind. Not out of resentment, but out of coherence. The good wife died, and in her place, the true woman was born. And that woman, even if she never ascends to an altar, is already sacred, because she made of her own body, her own time, her own silence, her temple. There comes a moment when a woman stops searching, not because she gave up, but because she finally understood. She no longer seeks love as a promise, no longer longs for someone to complete her, a kiss to heal her, a relationship to give her meaning, because she herself became meaning. That is the point of return, the point of rubedo, the final phase of alchemy described by Jung. After the nigredo, the symbolic death. After the albedo, the clearing of consciousness, comes rubedo, the incarnation of the soul in the body, and the woman becomes serene fire. External union is only possible when the inner union has already occurred. Before that, all love is only hunger. And the inner marriage is not a poetic metaphor. It is a psychological, spiritual, and visceral process. The woman crossed the shadows, stripped away the masks, buried the good wife, learned to inhabit her solitude, and in the end, united the opposites within herself. Eros and logos, soul and reason, anima and animus. She no longer needs to project her inner masculine onto external partners, because it now lives within her, not as a figure of authority, but as a fluid and respectful inner dialogue. What once was lack became clarity. What once was dependence became presence. What once was waiting became being. She can love deeply, but no longer with the desperation of needing to be seen. She loves with the freedom of one who has already seen herself, naked, wounded, whole. The man who finds her now will not find a wife. He will find a mirror, not the kind that reflects the ego, but the mirror of the soul, where he will see what he did not know he needed to see, his own shadow, his own light. She does not love to be loved. She loves because she became love. Her touch does not bind, it frees. Her presence does not demand, it radiates. And if that man is not ready, she does not hold him back. She blesses him and moves on, because she now understands that true love is not a golden prison, nor a symbiosis, nor a test of endurance. It is a dance between two wholes, not a collage of wounded halves. This is the alchemical marriage. It does not happen in a stone temple, but in the invisible temple between breath and presence. It is when the woman looks at herself and says, "I belong to myself. I am my own altar. I am the mystery I was seeking in the other." And then the world trembles, because a woman who has reached this state can no longer be domesticated. She is the living manifestation of the anima mundi, the soul of the world. Every gesture of hers becomes ritual. Every silence, an oracle. Every gaze, a blessing or a mirror. The woman who married her soul is rare, not because she is inaccessible, but because few dare to cross the labyrinth. But when she crosses it, she becomes immortal in spirit, not in the literal sense, but because everything she touches carries the seed of awakening. She no longer needs external ceremonies because she has already heard the voice that no religion teaches, no psychologist prescribes, no lover can replace, the voice of integrated consciousness. That woman does not fear loving, but she does not accept just any love. She knows that love born from lack, from habit, or from dry convenience withers the soul. The soul only accepts love that expands, that makes one grow, that breathes alongside. And if that love does not appear, it is fine, because she already has herself. And that is not selfishness. It is sanity. She can live in partnership, yes, but not to complete an absence, rather to celebrate a fullness. And if living alone is the price of freedom, she pays it with tears, with nostalgia, with long nights, but she pays it because she now knows the value of what she carries within. She is no longer the bride who waits. She is the ceremony itself. She is the altar. She is the fire. She is the offering. She is the sacred that was always sought. And that sacred does not fit into rings, surnames, or promises. That sacred is conscious breathing, is a gaze without masks. It is overflowing presence. Now even time changes. She no longer measures life by social milestones. She measures it by the intensity of presence, by the truth of encounters, by the depth of losses. She knows that love that comes and goes is part of the flow, but what remains is what transforms her. And so the circle closes. The woman who once dreamed of marriage as salvation today marries her own shadow and becomes light. So why should a woman never marry? Because no external ritual can replace the deepest commitment that exists, the commitment to never abandon herself. Because while the world pushes you toward roles, wife, mother, the right girl, the soul whispers, you are much more than that. And until that whisper becomes a voice, and that voice becomes action, marriage will always be a fragile mirror held up by lack. The woman who dares to walk inward, who gets lost in the labyrinth of her own fears, who confronts the pain of no longer being who others wanted, but also not yet knowing who she truly is. That woman is preparing herself. She does not marry out of desperation. She does not love through projection. She does not promise out of fear. She waits not for someone, but for her own fullness. And when that fullness arrives, she becomes capable of something the world deeply fears, loving in freedom. The world fears women like this because they cannot be tamed, they cannot be sold, they cannot be used to confirm expectations. But perhaps that is exactly what the world needs most, right now. Whole women who love, yes, but who first have married their own silence, their own chaos, their own truth. And when that inner marriage happens, every form of love that comes afterward will only be mirror, reflection, echo, not prison. If you made it this far, I need to tell you something. And I do not say it out of obligation, thank you. Not that automatic end of video, thank you, but a thank you that comes from someone who has already gone through this process inwardly, from someone who has already cried, staring at the ceiling, feeling that everything was being done right, yet missing herself, from someone who had already been the good wife everyone admired, and still felt empty. I wrote this script remembering a night when I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at a relationship that seemed perfect, but was silently consuming me. And I asked myself, is this it? Is this the love they say is destiny? The answer came slowly, the way everything real arrives. It was not him who was wrong. It was me who had not yet found myself. Since then, I spent years stripping away labels, expectations, and characters, and only after that, did I begin to understand what Jung spoke so much about regarding individuation. If this video touched you, unsettled you, made you rethink, then it fulfilled its role. Because the soul does not awaken in comfort, it awakens in the abyss. And only those who had the courage to look inward know. The abyss has a face, and many times it is our own.